December 10th. It is a meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. It is a work session. In a moment, I'm going to ask everyone to rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. After we say the pledge, we unfortunately had one of our, the GCA employees, James Todd, who passed away within the last couple of days. So we would ask that everyone remain standing for a moment of silence for Mr. Todd. So at this time, could we please rise and say the pledge of the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone could just remain standing for a moment. Thank you. Please be seated. Lorene, could you please call the roll?
Linda Avanzado.
Here.
Don Biscardin.
Here.
Larry Cerisi.
Here.
Cheryl Clarkin. Robert Jones.
Here.
William Mudge.
Here.
Kimberly Page.
Here.
Julia Hell. Thank you.
Lorene, could you please call the calendars?
December 16th, 6:30 p.m. joint meeting with the Town Council, Beechwood Senior Center. Also, December 16th, 3:30 Wellness Committee meeting. This is an addition to your calendar. December 18th, 5 p.m. Facility Subcommittee meeting. December 23rd to December 1st, or to January 1st is holiday recess. December 25th is Christmas Day. All schools and offices closed. January 1st, New Year's Day. All schools and offices closed. January 7th, 8 a.m. Policy Subcommittee meeting. January 14th, 7 p.m. School Committee meeting, North Kingstown High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Presentations and recognitions. Are there anybody who we need to recognize, Dr. Ajay?
I don't have anything tonight.
Besides Stony Lane, which we've been here recognizing all this evening, the great things they've done, and the Blue Ribbon Award, is there anything anyone else on the committee has that we should recognize? All right, seeing no hands, this is citizens' comment time. Is there any citizens who would like to comment? If so, please come up to the mic and state your name and your address, and you have the floor. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Grace Antuano. I live on 15 Field Court, and I'm a student at North Kingston High School. I have a few comments regarding Common Core standards and standardized testing. However, before starting, I would like to take a moment to read from the core values and belief statement of North Kingston High School. North Kingston High School is committed to providing our students with a learning environment and experiences that foster their growth as individuals and support them in becoming effective communicators, problem solvers, independent thinkers, skillful collaborators, active citizens, and self-directed lifelong learners. This sounds fantastic on paper, but let's take a look at the reality of the statement. In 2010, Rhode Island officials agreed to the full implementation of Common Core state standards by the school year of 2015. As a current NKHS student, I have seen changes in the school system, changes that I attribute to the increasing use of Common Core. One of the most significant changes that I have yet to witness but anticipate is the replacement of NECAP with PARCC testing. PARCC, short for Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Career, is a test that students will take each year, starting in 3rd grade and continuing through 12th grade. PARCC measures how well the teachers have taught according to the standards. That is, if teaching is the correct word to describe the forced regurgitation of specific information so that businessmen in expensive suits give our schools more money. PARCC takes away our teachers' right to teach. Not only does it take away the teacher's right to teach, but it takes away the students' quality of education. That is the issue at large. It is that we will be forced to remain inside of the lines that the standards draw for us. It is that we will be squeezed into molds, but education cannot be one size fits all. We are students who have our own strengths and weaknesses, but above all, we are individuals. Individuals who each have unique talents, imaginations, ambitions, and passions, all of which are things that cannot be measured by numbers, because they are what makes us different. I believe it is this diversity in perspective and in knowledge that is exactly what makes education so valuable. I personally believe it is also what makes our schools so great. However, through the full implementation of Common Core standards, this diversity and these traits will be stripped from our school and from our students. With this form of education, how can we possibly become effective communicators, problem solvers, independent thinkers, skillful collaborators, active citizens, and self-directed lifelong learners? If these are the types of people that we are striving to become, if these are our core values, why would we ever allow our student body to become indoctrinated into a system in which the students are mass-produced and represent nothing more than statistics and dollar signs? Our education is a valuable learning experience. It is not a uniform programming, nor is it an opportunity to make money. Let our teachers teach and let our students learn. Stop Common Core state standards. I know in saying this that there is only so much one district of all those in Rhode Island can do, as this is largely based on the decisions of the Rhode Island Department of Education. However, I do not doubt the power of one voice. At this point, I ask that you consider the following. Reevaluate your support for Common Core. Do you feel that this properly represents the opinions of the students, staff, and citizens of North Kingstown? Reassess the standards. If they are not the best, then why are we allowing them to be enforced? Lastly, I ask that you determine what your goal is while serving on the committee. Are you simply trying to meet the state benchmarks or provide the best education possible for the students? Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
Ceremony mode.
Hi, my name is Shelley McDonald. I'm a resident of North Kingstown, 67 Rose Hill Road, Saunderstown, Rhode Island. I'm also a teacher at North Kingstown High School. I had emailed the school committee and Dr. Auger last night regarding my concerns about the wireless technology that is being proposed to be put in all the schools. My concerns are that it is a fairly new technology that has not been adequately tested, and I'm wary about the decision to put that technology into our schools before it's been deemed safe for children. Just a couple things. Cell phone and tablet manuals instruct people to keep these devices away from their bodies because the radiation is detrimental. I am wary that parents have not been informed. The staff and the faculty haven't been informed of the possible health risks. And I think that that is something that absolutely should be done before implementing this. There is no safe level of microwave radiation for children. No studies have been done on children specifically. And what we're finding from other studies is that children are affected adversely, and they're affected more than adults because they're still developing. And their brains are still developing, their bodies are still developing. They're affected more. Wi-Fi is classified as a carcinogen. So I think that that alone is something that we should take into account before we put it into our schools. Constant exposure to Wi-Fi radiation at this scale, at this level, has never been studied. It's never been looked at. It's never been checked for safety. And that we're going to put it into our schools, and our children will be exposed to 3 times the amount of radiation than they would be exposed to if they stood next to a cell phone tower for that same amount of time. It's a lot of radiation, and we're not sure what the health effects are yet. Wi-Fi radiation has been linked to symptoms such as headache, nausea, nosebleeds, memory loss, difficulty concentrating, racing heart, developmental problems in children, learning difficulties in children, and degenerative diseases like cancers. The Bioinitiative report of 2012 can list 1,800 studies with evidence for the potential of biological impacts. And I'd like to point out that Wi-Fi is not essential to learning. I agree that the internet is a tremendous resource, but our schools are wired for wired internet, which is safer and more efficient It's more effective, and it does the same thing. We won't be getting off track if we don't use Wi-Fi. So what I'm going to ask tonight is I'm going to ask the school department to hold off on any decisions that involve putting wireless technologies into our school until such a time as it's been proven safe for children. I urge you to please look into the risks more. Barring that, I ask you to at least communicate the possible risks to the parents, to the staff, to the faculty, so that at the very least we know what to look for, parents know what to look for, and we can report back if anything bad does happen. So that's what I wanted to say tonight. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further citizens' comments? All right, that brings us into superintendent's report.
I don't have any report tonight. Thank you.
All right, that brings us to routine items. We had our executive session here tonight. Do I have a motion to seal the executive session minutes from December 10th, 2013?
Motion to seal?
Yes, okay. I'm going to hold off on this vote because we've nearly recessed from executive session, as Mr. Cerisi reminded me. And so we'll just need to make sure that we adjourn from executive session, or I should say, close the executive session before we seal the minutes. So, and but as I remember, there was no vote of executive session minutes as yet. Am I correct, Lorraine?
While I was present, there were no votes, no.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to our consent agenda. Is there anything to be exempted from the consent agenda? I will say there is for C1, in the letter that we had in there for the request of the change of bus contract, that should be, the request is for a purchase of a 2006 bus, not a 2013 bus. So I want to make that clarification for the record. Yes, Mr. Mudge.
I got a couple of quick comments on each of the items there on the consent agenda.
Do you have a comment on everything?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. But regarding the bus contract,
Well, let's start with the.
Can I do something, please?
All right, so let's start with B, and basically you have a question on B1.
Yes. B1 is the technology technology equipment for computers. We have 2,000 computers in our school system. Just the question I had there. And could we get some input on who the Rhode Island Society of Technical Evaluators are?
That RITC is a group that the IT groups in all the schools work through. It's like a purchasing group, and they work together on technology that they all find works well, and they also, work together with RFPs and doing deals and everything. And yes, we do have that many desktops in our district.
Oh, that's good to know that. Also, with respect to that, can those folks help us putting together a technology plan, by the way? Anybody?
I'm not sure about that, but I could certainly find out.
Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve B1?
Second?
Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing no further discussion on, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to point out for the community at large that the use of this bid, and Mrs. King can correct me if I'm wrong, but saves us over 100,000 or more if we had to purchase this stuff individually, plus the inclusion of the Microsoft IT Academy. So I just like the citizens to know this is a very cost-efficient way of getting this technology for our school district.
Thank you. All right, is there any other further comments or questions? Those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries. That brings us to C. Mr. Mudge, you had
Is that
question?
transportation?
No, that is request for a change in the bus contract.
Yeah. Looking at that, that's merely an extension to the contract, right?
It's really what we're doing is actually transferring one contract to Mr. Hill, but it would end at the end of the current bus contractor's contract. Mr. Hill is here tonight, and he is aware of that. So he's just purchasing this 2006 bus from another contractor, and he knows that his contract would end in 2016 unless there's another agreement with the group after that.
Well, my question was, and I don't have a problem with this, I just want to get the mechanics squared away. Does the current bus that he's procuring have a contract associated with it?
It does, and that, it doesn't, Mr. Mumford? What is that bus being used for now? Oh, that's right, it's a spare.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excuse me, that was my question. Mr. Mumford wasn't giving up a contract.
No.
Okay, so from that standpoint, he wasn't giving the contract up, and we're going to actually extend the other contract for 2 years, as I understand it, and it would go to 2018 based on the life of the bus itself. Okay, so that clarifies that for me.
2016. 16.
Well, 16, but if it goes beyond that, the bus could be
Yes.
used for another 2 years.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. No problem.
All right, so we have that clarification. Is there any further questions?
No, fine.
I'm looking for a motion
For a motion to approve?
approve C1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Okay, personnel items. Mr. Mudge, you had a question or a comment?
Yes. Has that position already been filled?
Which one?
Well, for the individual that's taking the leave of absence starting November 28th? The physical therapy assistant?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So that'll come before us then for a new person, I understand. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve D? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
All those opposed, motion passes. Okay, that brings us to the end of the consent agenda and to the unfinished business. The first thing on the agenda is the 2013 school budget transportation.
I don't mind speaking to the transportation piece, but before I do so, I didn't know if the superintendent or director of administration had, and I didn't want to bypass the 13, 14 budget agenda topic before I move over to the transportation topic. So before I move over to that, I didn't know if there was anything as far as the general budget topic goes. So, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. As you may recall, at our last meeting, I had some questions regarding transportation that I asked if we could put on this agenda, because in all fairness to the superintendent and our director of administration, I hadn't had an opportunity to speak to them regarding these questions. I have had an opportunity in the interim between our meetings to speak to our director of administration. And my concerns, which I have voiced to my colleagues on the committee, as well as the superintendent and director of administration, revolve largely around ensuring that we had a procedure in place for staffing of our supervisor's office or the transportation office at our central administration building. Obviously, particularly during the times of normal operations, when our buses, our large buses and our mini buses, with students and our bus drivers are out on the roads, should there be a routine business, or should on some type of unfortunate emergency arise, whether it be safety or health or what have you. So I've had the opportunity over the past week to speak with Mrs. King a little bit about that, and I think we've largely covered the points of concern, and I don't know if she wants an opportunity to speak to that.
I didn't get to finalize any type of written procedure, but I do think that we are covered with any of the concerns that you had. We do have, I think one thing that people might not understand is that we really need coverage of our transportation system from 5 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. until about 6 o'clock at night, especially in the inclement weather. That's when, I might be on the phone, or Dr. Ajay might be on the phone to our transportation supervisor about delays or cancellations. Also, anytime during the year when you need a monitor because someone is called in sick, or a bus driver for the minibuses, someone's called in sick. So it's a very large span of time to be covered for 2 people. But I think they do a very good job of that. Our transportation supervisor takes the 2-way radio with him at night for the late buses. The office phone is forwarded to his cell phone as well. All the bus drivers have his phone number, so I can certainly make sure that I put that down in a concise procedure for you to review, for the whole committee to review. But I do think that we do have things covered, and knock on wood, if there were an emergency, we are all set.
Thank you, Mrs. King. I guess we could proceed from here if there are no objections. Is obviously, a lot of budgetary items going on at this time when Mrs. King has an opportunity, maybe at one of our meetings in January. If that time frame sounds okay to everyone, she could provide the committee with a recommended written procedure. And I think when you reduce it to writing, it clears up any misinterpretation or misunderstanding between all the parties involved, rather than just kind of having a verbal discussion or agreement, because, let's face it, 5 years and 10 years from now, hopefully that procedure in writing is still in place, and most of us won't be here, so, the procedure, hopefully, yeah. So, thank you for taking the time to communicate with me this week, Mrs. King, and work on that. And hopefully, sometime in January, we can have a little bit more of a discussion as a committee, and just kind of agree to the procedure and carry out. So I appreciate it.
All right, is there anybody else who had any other questions about that, Mr. Mudge?
I have a question.
And I will say, it's a little difficult to have we have the paper for me to see,
Yeah.
so I appreciate making sure that you put out your hand like that, so, because I
fine.
can't see real well this table format.
Separately on transportation, I'm still concerned about the opportunities that exist to save money. I'd like to say also that I see that the Cranston School Department has decided not to go with a statewide contract, basically, and felt it was more apparently more or less expensive than staying with their own system. And I think in the past we've had a lot of reports that says ours is a very good system, one of the best in the state. It was mentioned a few years ago. But with that said, I would like to know what we're doing with our special ed buses, as well as out of district transportation. Those costs are in the range of like $900,000 a year between those. And it's my understanding that still I haven't seen anything that has come by us that says that and I think it's got us in a vice grip here, is that either our application has been denied or we hadn't been looked at to join the RIDE out-of-district transportation, program, which supposedly was supposed to save money. Nonetheless, I think the counter on that, the point was on that was that at one time we were told we couldn't do that because we're our own contract. And I would disagree with that because we have a separate contract for a separate function than minibuses, special education, and everything else. That's covered under law, but not the minibuses. And, we're paying full-time salaries, for people, for the full year, so forth and so on. So I'm really looking to get a firm commitment on where we're going, because if we can't join RIDE, then I think it's time that we looked at contracting out that function. Okay, so we got to address that. It's been going on for several years, and we've got to do something about that, especially with our, finances coming up. So I'd like to get a status at the next meeting, or if somebody can call me on that. But, this has been lingering for several years, and I think it's an opportunity that we can all save money on.
Well, the only option that we would have with the out-of-district buses is to go to RIDE, because I think Mrs. Carroll can expound on this as well, but there is a law that if you are currently not in that system and you go to change your system, you are mandated to go to the RIDE system for that piece. So that out-of-district thing, we can, at some point, if the committee wants to look at that, we can look at that, but we don't, it's not an RFP process. It's either what we have or it's RIDE.
Well, but see, that's what I don't understand, because we have two separate functions that are being performed, one by contractors, which I believe is applicable to RIDE. Okay?
The contractors would be, the contractors, if we wanted to do an RFP for that, we certainly could, and we could get quotes from anybody. But the law states that if you are looking in your special ed routes and your out-of-district busing routes, you must go to the RIDE model.
Again, we need to look at that, because I just can't believe the state can force us to do something. But again, I'm not going to question it. The fact is, it's been going on for several years, okay, and it hasn't happened.
I believe that a couple of years ago, we went out to bid for our special ed and out-of-district buses, and it was more expensive. And we talked about the special ed services that we get with our own buses and our own people and running our own routes. But we went out to bid anyway, and it was more expensive to go to the state system. This was definitely, since I've been here, we've done that. State transportation, it was more expensive than what we're doing in district.
Well, maybe you've answered my question.
Yes.
If I could get a copy of that so I could look at it, then.
Could I?
Yes, Mrs. Avanzato.
When was that law passed, Mary Ann, do you know?
Oh, quite a few years ago, longer than I've been sitting with this committee.
So last time we discussed this issue, when we did put together an RFP, the state was the only option then as well?
Yes, and it still is the only option for your out-of-district runs.
And as I recall, we had signed up and shown some interest with the state, and then they said, we can't give you a price. And we said, well, we're not really interested if you can't give us a price.
It was, I think a couple of times, if you remember, we talked about going with the state.
Yeah.
Mr. Cerisi, I think you were chair at the time.
But I have
Yeah.
to concur with some of Bill's concerns. Larry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That was the first year that the state had offered that statewide transportation. And they were in the infant stages of implementing, and at the time, they basically wanted us to send them a check, and they would write in the dollar amount for us on how much we'd be paying them. So I think we decided against that. So.
And it didn't turn out so well that year, but maybe we should look at it again to see if it's gotten any more efficient. I don't know. Mary Ann might have an idea of that, working with other districts, whether or not they've improved at all in their costs.
So is that something this committee is looking for, is to, or is this more of a discussion item at this point?
Well, I'd like to have it looked at, okay, and bring it up to date on what the status is, because we're almost paying enough just for special ed bus transportation as we offer regular ed transportation. You know, it's right up there. And it's not that, you know, maybe it's efficient, I don't know, but it's something that we've got to look at. And if the state doesn't want to look at it, then again, I'd like to look at the plan. I don't think it happened on my watch, okay? The transportation plan, the bid that went out for the cost of that, and maybe therein lies the issue with it. It isn't efficient. I was unaware of that, if that's the case.
Well, it would be my understanding that it's either the state or it's us. And right now, it's us and it's under contract. So it is the sort of thing, it would not be something that we could just
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the contract. The one I'm talking about is the
talk about
special ed buses. So
and that's what is under
We have
contract.
employees that are under contract that work those minibuses.
okay, as opposed to the professional or the contractors.
Correct.
Okay, but so again, we have to look at those and.
Mr. Busgarden.
Yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile to see if the state is, they've tightened up their process in any way, shape, or form. If they can give us a more concrete number of what they would charge us. Because I just find it difficult to believe that it can't be done cheaper elsewhere, quite frankly. We're paying 8 hours a day, full 8 hours a day, full benefits, and I think that the state can't do better than that. I would like to see if they can get a number. And if I recall, they couldn't give us a concrete number. They just felt they could do better. It was just a gut feeling on their part. I would like to see if they've been able to put some sort of quantitative numbers on their gut feeling.
But one of the things early on, and I know that the first 3 years with First Student for statewide busing, they are that has expired, and they are working on a new contract. One of the biggest issues that districts had would be when you were planning for your special education routes. Say, for example, there were 5 students that were going from this end of Rhode Island to Meeting Street, and it was 5 different districts, so you'd be splitting the cost of that bus 5 different ways. But then when something, a student no longer took that bus or the school year started, you were no longer splitting it 5 ways, you were splitting it 4 ways or 3 ways. And that was one of the very big issues with the charges from statewide busing because, as you know, it's very difficult to find that kind of money, and you really had no choice at that point. Now, one thing I do know that RIDE has communicated, it was over the summer they communicated that was one of the things that they were going to be working on as well, to try to figure out a better model for the districts, because it is something sometimes you just don't know. A student might go to a different placement or whatever. So that was one of the issues that they dealt with, one of the bigger ones. And then some of the other districts had some issues with time and very large geographical areas. I know Exeter West Greenwich had some issues with that. Those were some of the things that I recall being a problem.
Okay.
All right.
And
Mr. Busgarden.
just quickly on the procedural things for the transportation office at administration building. I think when it gets put into a policy or a procedure in writing, I think that'll just help everybody that's concerned. It'll help with people that are covering for vacations or illnesses or sicknesses, because there won't be a question then on how things are done. They can pick up their procedure manual and read through it and know the way things need to be done. It'll make, I think, everybody's job above that certain position easier too, because you then have a bit of satisfaction knowing that there's a reference manual they can go to make sure everything's getting done the way it should be when it was fully staffed with the normal people. So I think that's a good idea. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point. Thank you to Mr. Cerisi for bringing this issue for visibility. And if we're in sort of line with what Mr. Mudge said, if we can just leave this item as a topic, now that we're got the enrollment reports and stuff, is just potentially relook at not the entire, but some of the low-density routes and stuff, just to see some of the issues that were raised from the audit that was done last year, just to keep this as a placeholder for that. Thank you.
Mr. Mudge, I do have that chapter title if you'd like it. It's 1621.1-8.
And if, do you have a copy of that, the memo that, the study we did?
I'll see what I can find. That would be in Mr. Draper's.
Now I think I recall, but I don't think it happened in the last couple of years, did it?
Well, I've been here a year and a half. I believe it was probably a good year and a half before that, so it's probably 3 years or so.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands, I think we are ready to move on to the 2014-2015 school budget. Why don't we have an update of where we are with that? I will say that I did receive a phone call today from Council President Liz Dolan to ask about our meeting on the December 16th, and she expected the meeting to last no more than about an hour. I told her that it was my understanding that that Dr. Ajay was making discussing some budget points and also talking about the Davisville the clinical day program as to where we were on that, and those were the only two things that I know that are on that'll be discussed, and I confirmed that here tonight.
Excuse me? Excuse me?
Yes.
You know, on that, I had, the comment I think we have a fiduciary responsibility also by town charter as well as Rhode Island General Law 16.2 to meet certain specific standards when we meet with the town council. They are required to provide us with certain information, and we are required to provide them with certain information. And when I get home, I'll send you that again. And it's rather specific because what they're talking about is not just finances, but they owe us information on what they feel the revenue stream is going to be. We owe them information on what we think we're going to have for plans for next year, for staffing changes, for enrollment changes, and things like that. So I would appreciate it if we address what Rhode Island 16.2 suggests that we have with the town council. And also, I think as members, we ought to make a list of questions that we have of the town council, okay, in terms of the budget and what we as the school committee feel the council needs to address as priorities for us.
Well, I can certainly ask Mrs. Dolan what she thinks about that. This is the town council meeting. It is their agenda that they are putting it together, so I can request that of her. I would ask for you, Mr. Mudge, if you could be a little more specific to the committee as to what are the items that you want to ask the council for, and also the items that you want us to provide, because that would be helpful in facilitating the meeting if we have something more specific. Mrs. Avanzato.
Certainly.
As I recall, and I could be incorrect about this, but in terms of what's required by law, that information is required but not necessarily at that particular meeting. And I remember Mrs. King provided all of that to us. She copied the committee on everything that she did provide to the council on those items last year, as I remember, in a timely fashion. Maybe not at the meeting, because I don't know that that's what that meeting is for, so.
Well, again, it's for our goals and objectives as well, our own, not just the superintendent's. But and I'll send you that to everyone, what I believe we need to do, what the exchange is supposed to be. I think it's important to get that right.
Thank you, Bill.
All right. That brings us to, yes, Mr. Jones and Mrs. Avanzato. Mr. Jones first.
Thank you, Ms. Page. I guess it's laudable that our council, has an approximate time they'd like us to talk about, but I certainly hope it doesn't preclude at least a forthright discussion on some of the potential issues or or areas that the town's been working on, for example, their I won't say joint, their economic development study, which of course would be very informative for school district planning. I will sort of note with irony, reading a local paper, that on the same page where it talks about one of our schools working diligently to fundraise for a playground, the town council is talking about submitting a grant for a playground at a location that I thought was going to be acquired for private property and has a big building sitting on it. So I'd like us to keep emphasizing that it's town property. You know, our school playgrounds are town property. Our ball fields and our open space are town property to be used by a variety of stakeholders. So I'm hoping that the town council will at least share a little bit more than just the potential tax rate at this meeting. And I would also hope, although we're not going to meet again, that apparently things we've agreed upon, which maybe I missed that point, we'll at least be able to have some input before Monday. Thank you.
Mrs. Evans,
I want to totally chime in on that. I agree completely. Common planning between the town and the school department would be useful and welcome on items such as that. Thank you.
Mr. Streese.
I'd just like to apologize in advance that I won't be in attendance on Monday night. I have another obligation, so.
All right, if there's no further discussion, then the discussion of the web page outsourcing. So I guess my first question is to Dr. Auger. Dr. Auger, would this be something that's in the technology group, or are they having this discussion? And then my other question would be, is this something that is in the technology survey that is being discussed?
Yes. You know, we are currently going about a survey loosely conceived, of, you know, having an outside company come into North Kingstown. They've run a number of focus groups with students, staff, community members, the administration, about where we are with our technology needs. It was personally an item that I brought to the attention of the leadership of that group and the people asking the questions to help us to, you know, with the web pages that we do as well. That it's not simply about, you know, whether we have laptops in the students' hands, but a much broader scope. So it is something that we have, you know, on our radar. I'm very encouraged by the people that I've met who have done this study, and I feel that they're particularly sharp and have a lot of understanding of how many districts have gone about their technology use, and have a lot of good comparisons in terms of districts our size and what are people doing to solve the technology problems that they come across. So I am encouraged that they're going to be able to give us some advice on this, as well as a number of other items. And as I mentioned before, I know Mr. Jones is looking for some help in terms of our web page outsourcing. What we have is certainly not perfect, but it is certainly a step in the right direction from what we had before that. And I am certainly open to a number of ideas to make it better still. I'm very encouraged from what Mr. Booth is telling me about the Blackboard portal and how that's coming along. It is still, you know, not quite ready for prime time yet, but we're getting closer. And I've already seen some of the district, you know, what the web page would look like, and some of the, you know, Mr. Booth tells me that the ease of use is growing. The professional development for the people who do coordinate our web page is happening. So we're on the right track and, open to a lot of ideas. Recently, one that came out, I believe, from Mr. Jones as well, was connecting with URI and their technology people to get some help in terms of internships and that sort of thing, not only for this, but for working with our kids, and that would be perfectly fine with me as well. So I think we're on the right track. A lot of people have been asking about this. A lot of people are asking, what is the long-term vision for the district? And this study is exactly along those lines, to set up a long-term vision for the district so we know what it is we want to achieve and how to get there and have an ability to sustain it over the years. And this is a part of it. So,
Comments, questions? Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. Excuse me. I'd like to thank Dr. Auger for his comments and taking this issue and excuse me, taking this issue and pursuing it in greater depth. I just point out, as an area of emphasis when, for example, the town talks about economic development and making North Kingstown an attractive place for folks and families to move to. Obviously, people are more reliant on the web and other things when they're thinking about searching communities. And obviously, we have great concern about our physical presence, how our schools look, the curb appeal, those kinds of things. Our cyber presence is our curb appeal in that virtual world. And for folks not only looking to come here, but our parents and our community members, the more we make it functional, we make ease of navigation, we make all that just more, just better, the more I think it helps the entire community. So I appreciate the superintendent pursuing this issue with to the extent he's mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for the information you set out to the committee on the update of the technology committee. That was very helpful and very insightful. Appreciate that. Is there any other comments about the discussion of the web page outsourcing? All right, that brings us to new business. Dr. Auger, you sent us out some information about staffing analysis.
Yes, I know that you are, many members of the committee are interested in looking at, how we staff our classrooms. I tried to give you as detailed an analysis of teachers' schedules and the classes that they have and the number of kids in each class. I don't know how to proceed right now. I don't know if it's wise to kind of go to every little number on every page, but particularly with the high school and the middle school schedules in mind, I tried to provide you with a lot of notations about, particularly if a number looks low, and what kinds of things those things could mean. There are a million different variations and items that could come into play when staffing a high school, for instance, and from the availability of the class to the availability of the students to take the class during any particular period, to the load of students the teacher already has in the room, or the load of the students the teachers have as the cap for their total student caseload. So there's a lot to it. My administrators are more than eager to meet with any members of the school committee who would like to meet in my office and go through some details and ask questions. That would not be a problem. I've done high school scheduling myself for 9 years, and it is quite a cumbersome process, and there's a lot of complexity to it. Not all of it is rocket science, but if you don't understand every nuance of it, some things can really look out of place, and it's easy to jump to conclusions.
Mrs. Avanzato.
I want to thank you, Phil, for putting that together. That was a huge amount of information. Did it quickly, and so I really appreciate it. I need time to, go over it and think about it, look at it, and Bob, I thought you asked some good questions, and Phil, you already got back to him with, detailed answers, so I really appreciate the back and forth. I learned a lot from reading that. I'm just going to take a closer look and kind of digest it, and so I'm sure we'll be talking about it again, but thank you, Phil, appreciate it.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate all the information that we were provided with. As I've said before, from the complexity comes questions, obviously. And for me, it's never been at the elementary school level because I think the student-teacher ratio there is pretty simple and straightforward. I think when you get into the middle schools and the high schools, like you said, it becomes more complex with different sections and classes and so on and so forth. I have not had the opportunity to review the material that you had sent us. And I would like to, I guess my suggestion or request at this point would be we just received that material over the last couple of days. Maybe the best process would be to allow the committee some time to review it, and we keep this as an agenda item, and when we get back to it at our next regular scheduled meeting, I think by that time the committee members would have an opportunity to review it and formulate any questions either ahead of time for you or at that meeting, and decide as a committee how we'd like to proceed from there. So that would be my request at this time, if there's no objections to that.
I think Mr. Jones certainly gave a lot of questions, and so probably it would be helpful, too, if other committee members gave questions, if you had them ahead of time, so that because we do have a lot of time in between now and the 14th, and so then that will make sure that we finish up with our analysis at that point, or at least know where we're going from there. So I saw some hands up. Mrs. Avanzato and Mr. Mudge.
I was just going to say, I view this as a tool that we might be coming back to, repeatedly through budget season and different things. So I'm sure we'll have more questions as time goes on, and I would agree with the process that Larry just described.
Thank you. Mr. Mudge.
Yeah, I just have one general question this time, and it's a lot to absorb here. And that is, when I looked at this under the pupil column, and you see the different different classes each teacher teaches, and that translates into time and so forth and so on. But it's not indicative of the length of the course. Like I'm looking at one here, Algebra 2 CP, and so forth and so on. What would be the average class of? Do we have a policy for the number of kids that should be in a class? I recall at some point in time, for example, that if we had what am I trying to say, an advanced class, that we have to have a minimum in there of 8 to 10 people. I'm not sure. So that's two questions that kind of in one.
Sure.
Is that what's our goal for kids in the class, and then I guess do we have a minimum that we meet?
Well, we have by contract a cap that no class can be more than 28 students, and that no teacher in the 5 classes that they teach can have more than 125 students. So, that's, and there are certain ways of going about things, practices that we keep, where, for instance, a class of, honors students, for instance, is a class that I have no problem with going to the max every time we get the opportunity. Don't always get the opportunity, but the research shows that students who have that level of skill can perform well with a larger class, where that may not be the case with a class that has more of a remedial level to it, or a class that may be kind of an inclusion type of class. Success Academy, for instance, at the high school, that sort of thing. So generally speaking, over the years, because of budget concerns, we've tried to make a minimum with the high school administration, where in the past it's been around 15, that a regular kind of general ed type of class, whether it's an honors or CP, we would look for a minimum of 15. In the last couple of years, we've ratcheted that up to 17, that no matter what, you need to have 17 to go with that class. Sometimes we have situations where it starts with 17 or a little bit more than that, but because of the 10-day period at the beginning of the year where students, because of one reason or another, have to have their schedule fixed, have to change a class. It could be simply because they want to, or in most cases, because they need to. For one reason or another, it may turn out that that number that we actually get through the remainder of the year is less than 17. That's not that often. Generally speaking, most of the regular ed teachers have a schedule that, has roughly somewhere between 110 and 125 students on their caseload.
Thank you, Dr.
Sure.
All right, if there are no further questions, that brings us to the end of our agenda. So I would look for a motion to recess back into our executive session. So moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great, so, Russ, Mary Ann,
You're going to have to come back out after executive session to seal the minutes and to seal your minutes.
Okay. Did the committee have anything further that we were going to be discussing in executive session? It was my understanding that we pretty much
I think we're
said
done.
we were going to say we were going to come back in January. So, Mary Ann, do we have to move away from the table, or can we just
Cancel the meeting? Adjourn the meeting?
Tell me, you're not going back?
We don't have
into
anything else we're going to need to talk about, so that's my
All right.
question.